All right, we are live. How's it going, everyone? I have an amazing guest here. And I know this is like one of the most anticipated lives. I'm telling you, it's been a while since I've done a live, but I feel that this is a relevant topic, regardless of what level you are at an organization, whether you're entry level, you're a senior professional, you're an executive. I am so excited, Rachel, about this toolbox and this entire book that you've created. And for those of you who don't know Rachel, I mean, you really should know who she is. Look her up on LinkedIn, for God's sake. But Rachel and I go way back. We
We
used to
do.
work together at Slalom. I was a troublemaker, I'm not going to lie. I mean, all of you know this. I did quit over text at some point. It wasn't while Rachel and I were working together, though. I promise. She would have probably been the force that calmed me down. But why I invited Rachel here is because honestly, she is, first of all, when we were at Slalom, she was and she still is an amazing engagement lead and senior account manager. She wrangled, this billion-dollar program and billions of dollar programs. And she has this amazing knack of making people feel heard and motivating them while dealing with very, very tough situations. And for those of you who are in consulting, you know what we're talking about. And hi, Spencer. Say hi, everyone, as you join in. So, this is why I invited her. But um, I heard about her book. I saw her post. She didn't tell me about it. Rachel, why didn't you tell me about it? But you do know like so many people. So of course you're not going to tell every single person individually. But as soon as I saw her post and heard about her book launching, and she generously, sent it to me, and I read the story behind it. Well, first of all, my heart, and then second of all, it's just, such a universal concept. And I think instead of spoiling it, I'm going to pass it on to you, Rachel, to share with us this amazing gift that took years and years of being in multiple consulting companies and, bringing in your wisdom from Salesforce as a leader and raising an amazing son. So, we're going to go into the pivotal moment that is behind writing this incredible book. I will pass it on to you.
Awesome. Thank you for the kind words. And Nadia, as always, it's awesome to just be in your presence and spend time with you today. And thank you for this opportunity. I really do. I appreciate you amplifying what is in the book. So the hard moment, the pivotal moment. So I'll take you back. Cooper was in middle school. He was in 7th grade. So he was 13 years old. And Cooper was in lunch line with his other buddy, and they were talking about gaming because that was their interest. And this other child turned around, who was actually in Cooper's math class. He turned around and got in Cooper's bubble just a little bit too close. And Cooper said, "Can you step back?" Like, he wanted him to get out of his bubble. And for those of you who don't know, Cooper is autistic. And so that personal space is like super important to him. And so he articulated his request, and Wayne, the other little boy, flicked Cooper off. He gave him the middle finger. And Cooper gave him his middle finger. And so now we have this exchange of middle fingers going on. And Wayne continues to push into Cooper's bubble, and Cooper continues to articulate, take a step back. And Wayne said the words that ignited just a horrific event. And he said to Cooper, "Why are your hands so white?" And for Cooper has a very scientific brain.
Yeah.
And so he sat in that question and he said, I don't know. Why are yours so black? And Wayne and 4 of his buddies went to the back of the lunchroom, and shared this information with another student that was sitting back there that was not in the line. And Cooper didn't think anything of it. And he continued through with his buddy, and he got his lunch, and he went to the table that he always goes to sit at, and he started to put his tray down on that table. And this other kid that wasn't in the conversation, he came up from behind and he was yelling, "Say it to me, say it to me. What'd you say? What'd you say?" Why he rained physical, pure violence down on Cooper's head, and he was punching him and beating him. Cooper had a para that was just standing nearby, and Cooper's para tried to grab the kid but couldn't. And the kid swirled around the lunchroom like Tasmania Devil on a cartoon. And he came back and he got him in the face, and he started punching him in the face. More adults are now joining in, trying to squash the situation. And the kid continues to run around and get away from these adults. And he comes back and he lands some significant punches on Cooper's left temple. And he's just beating his face. And they finally had 6 adults enter the lunchroom. And it took all 6 of those adults to get that 12-year-old child under control and off of Cooper. Cooper was rushed out of the lunchroom and into safety. But the school waited 2 hours before they called me.
Wow.
And I can remember calling 911 on the way to the school because they didn't provide him medical attention and they didn't call the officers. And so I did that. And I met the officer there and we debriefed with the officer, and we got Cooper in the car. And Cooper looked at me and he said the most profound statement, which was, "I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything, Mom." And I looked at him and his face was swollen and the marks were all over him. And I said, "Buddy, you did everything that we taught you to do in that moment." And that's where this book, I had experts, we had a lot of specialists on Cooper's healing journey. And all of them were consistently impressed with how in the heck did this kid remain so in control of himself, right? And they asked me, "What have you taught him?" And so I told them some of the tools that we've used. And they all encouraged me. Every single one of them said, "You need to write a book. You have to get this in the hands of other people because we need more people in the world to build the skill in order to respond to life situations." And it's a skill that you have to build. And they said, you did it for an autistic, a kid that had to learn what emotions were, a kid that had to learn how to navigate those emotions and regulate those emotions. And they said, what was most impressive was Cooper didn't strike back at this child when he was getting the living bleep beat out of him. And he was in crushing pain. He lost his hearing immediately. He lost his vision for a period of time. And he never made a fist. He never raised anything. He didn't raise his voice. He said, "Mom, all I knew was to just get small and to stay quiet." And that was the moment, that very painful moment of Cooper's life and our lives.
Yeah.
But it was the moment that we've been given to create a platform to speak about how to build the ability to respond to life situations and not just react to them.
Wow. this, like, there's always a first, and it's the first time that you guys can't see it because it's on camera, but this is the first time that I actually tear up on a LinkedIn Live. And I have to admit that when I read the first chapter that had your story, I full on bawled. Because, well, first of all, how old was Cooper when this happened?
So he was 13, and the child that beat him was 12.
Hmm.
And the child was convicted of third-degree assault felony charges.
Wow. I can't even imagine going through something like that, you know, not even at 13, like right now. Okay. Knock on wood, I'm lucky to say that I've never, experienced an assault, but to actually go through that at that age, and on top of that, to endure it for such a long period of time where you're not getting the support that matches what's going on, and it's so delayed and dismissive. And, in his mind, like you mentioned, I mean, for the sake of, like, a silly comparison, I'm thinking like Sheldon Cooper, Big Bang Theory, very literal type of mindset, right? Extremely intelligent, but very literal. He didn't think much of what he said. It wasn't coming from bad intention, right? And regardless, like, it shouldn't have warranted this type of, let's call it reaction.
Mhm.
So I can only imagine what he was going through in that moment, and the level of self-blame. I remember, I think it was maybe around 2018, maybe around that time. I was part of a basically dance group, and I was, a part of like an amateur performance group. And I was at an event, and I had just organized it for what would be my dance mentor. And she got drunk. She pulled my hair and she threatened to assault me. She didn't do it, she just threatened, right? And it took me, Rachel, over a year to get over that. And she didn't even touch me. And I'm an adult, like, in my 30s. And, just the involvement of the police and reliving that experience over and over and over again. And, just like your son, when this happens to you, you start questioning if you did something wrong. What did I do? That's the first thing that crosses your mind as a victim. What did I do to deserve this? Did I do something wrong? Should I have done something differently? So I can't even imagine, what he went through in that moment. And for you to also have to be the one to call 911, that's just something that I just can't comprehend.
Um,
So take us back into, how you reacted when he shared this with you as a mom, right? Hearing this from your son. You must have had all kinds of conflicting ideas. How did you find that calm to actually model what you've written in the book, to respond in a way that wouldn't trigger him and upset him even more? It's almost like you had to separate your own needs as a mom to kind of get that comfort and to do the right thing, to protect your son and empower him. How did you find that strength?
Well, I think too, I did let him see my real emotions and reaction, right? He was in a dean's office at the time, and they had him there with the police officer arrived before me, and they had the police officer, a couple deans, the school counselor. So he had a lot of adults around him, and I I didn't hold back my emotion from the response of seeing him. I cried my eyes out. But then I geared into this other space of almost an observer to it, and knowing first I needed to get him the medical treatment that he needed. And then two, I needed to make sure that we took the right steps to ensure accountability. And I think it just, I almost went into my business mindset. I almost went into large problem sitting in front of me, right? Large problem, simplify and process and run it through. And that, that's what I called on was that I really, to this day, I don't know why that other child did what he did, but I don't think that matters. What I feel for that other child is sadness that he had so much anger in his 12-year-old body that he could inflict that much physical hurt and damage onto another human being. And that's that I feel sad for that little boy, because that's a lot. That's for the damage that he did to Cooper and the injuries that he caused. Quite significant.
Yeah. I think that all of your basically upbringing and education and experiences in the corporate world influence this in some shape or form. And I think the reason, I mean, not everyone obviously has a child and has a neurodivergent child. And I do believe that, if for those of you who do have one, you are absolutely going to benefit from this book. It's literally a toolkit. And you mentioned to me as well that Cooper's specialist, was it his neurologist who Richard?
Dr. Richard Ziegler. Yeah.
Dr. Richard, what did he say to you? He said that in all of his years, he's never encountered someone who put together such a framework to actually help, their son in the way that you have. But I think on top of that, I do believe that everyone encounters a bully in some shape or form. Everyone encounters someone who dismisses their feelings or makes them feel less than, or just pushes their buttons to the point that you're almost like teetering between, putting them in their place and jeopardizing basically the outcome. And, how do I do this in a way that's actually going to benefit us all? Right. And some of you are in the transformation space. I know that a lot of my followers are in the world of agility and transformation, and you're dealing with big personalities and difficult personalities. And some of you, are somewhere in the middle management, which is actually one of the tough places to be, at the director level. You're sort of in between, the people that you're leading in the ground and just feeling their complaints and their pain. And then you're taking basically the orders from the top. And how do you create that peace? And there's a lot of that chaos. And I do believe that the framework that you put together would benefit people in any walk of life where they're dealing with someone difficult. And you can't run away from it. You have to deal with it. You can't just, say, hey, I'm just going to leave, tomorrow, quit over text, right? And so I am curious to know, what would you say has given you that insight from your experience as a senior account executive to actually create that toolkit?
Well, I think you're spot on. I mean, in our consulting days, we use every framework, methodology, that has been ever existed, right? And my brain is clearly geared to call upon those. And so it was pretty simple for me to think of putting Cooper at the center in the AMP model. When you get the book, you'll see that Cooper is at the center. And so I would ask any of you to put that person that maybe is difficult or mysterious to work with. You just can't quite read them or understand them. Put them in the middle of that model and ask yourself the questions of, what is the knowledge that I need to acquire about this individual so that I can support them better, so that they can show up as their best selves? How do they, what's their attitude and mindset? Are their goals motivating them? Are the rewards big enough for them? How are they showing up, right? And then think about that participation. I often think of this from a standpoint of not only like what triggers them and what responses do you see from any potential triggers? Do you know their triggers? Like, what are their hot buttons, their pet peeves? Like, really get to know them. And then I always say about participation, I've coached soccer and basketball, and no coach during practice just sits on the sidelines and yells, okay, let's do some finishing drills. Let's do some foot skills. Let's do some layups, without showing the players how to do those things. And I think that's what participation looks like. If you're wondering, why isn't this person showing up in this way? I really challenge you to fill out that circular, putting them at the center, because you might unveil some gaps that you've made assumptions about. And you can take more of a empathetic but active role in supporting them.
Absolutely. Was there, I mean, feel free to share, or maybe, keep it high level, but what would you say was a very tough situation that you dealt with in the workplace, especially as an account executive? And maybe walk us through like some pieces of the framework that you use to actually handle the situation. I'm so curious.
Yeah, I thought on this, obviously, over the few weeks in preparation for this moment right here. There's a lot of stories I could share, but one comes to mind was a few years ago. We were all on an internal meeting, so it's all same team. We're all on the same team. We're wearing the same logo, right? So we know our corporate values.
Yeah.
We know how, our culture. And so we know those things, and we share those things, and we extend those things to one another. And I can recall a team member got upset with me because he didn't like that I went to a particular meeting without informing him first. And he berated me in front of the entire 15-person team. And in the back of my head, the framework and these tools were popping. And the first one that popped was, no one gets in trouble for being quiet, for being silent. You can never get in trouble for being silent. So I stayed in that comfortable space of quietness as I took on these words. The other thing was 2-1 none. 2-1 none is a very simple practice, and you can all do it today with your family, with your coworkers. 2-1 none is grounded in, it takes two people to argue. If one drops out, there is no argument. They can't argue with themselves. They can try, but it's going to end pretty quickly because there's no reciprocation. You're not sending anything to them. So I really encourage everyone to remain in that silent space and be okay with that. Be okay with remaining silent and really practice that 2-1 none as part of that. And then the other part is player B. Player B is the player that engages after player A has set up the situation. So in this case, my colleague is not treating me very kindly with his words in a meeting. And I have two choices. I can become player B and I can engage the way he wants, like the way he's treating me. I can send that right back to him. Or I can choose to not become player B. And I can choose to operate the way my values say I will operate in that moment. And so that's just one example that popped that had both of those tools like coming together. And you have to be able to recognize that, right? The other thing is recognizing his function of behavior. There's only 4 functions of behavior that drive behavior. And that's, we as business professionals, we don't get to learn that. They don't teach us that in business
No,
school.
they don't.
Only learn that because Coop and his autism, right? Early on in the journey. And the 4 functions of behavior, attention seeking, avoidance, tangible, or sensory. And, you know, if I had to name his function of behavior, he was getting some attention from the way he was acting and treating me, but he also wanted something tangible. He wanted me to give him something that I couldn't because the situation had already passed. So I couldn't give him anything tangible, but he wanted something tangible. He wanted to know when I was having meetings, but it already passed. And so as I sat there in the silence, as I chose to one none, and as I chose not to become player B in that situation, he got tired of talking and he said, "Well, what do you have to say for yourself?" And I said, I don't know what I can tell you at this moment that will change anything. All I can focus on is going forward. And I said, now I know your standard and now I know what you expect of me. And so I think sometimes we have to, in that, we have to learn, right? We have to learn people's operating model or their default settings. And it's not always fun. It's not always fair. But I think I came out of it feeling pretty crappy because someone treated me poorly. But at the same time, I felt awesome because I stuck true to who I am. And he didn't move me off of that square. I remained me.
Yeah. I'm trying to go back to my corporate world experiences, even though it's been a while, and also think about how I respond to others. And maybe even, I don't even want to call it respond all the time, because I do feel that sometimes I react instead of respond, which is a big difference. And I'm actually thinking of a situation that happened this morning. Um, a lot of it I believe that what causes people to react versus to respond, I believe there are a couple of things that go on. It becomes a little bit complicated when there is a power imbalance, right? When you are in a position where you have less authority than the other person. So if that person is at a higher level than you, there is that, dynamic, and it creates almost that incentive for the person who is in a higher power to actually feel that they need to assert control or speak to you in a way. And then at the same time, because you are conscious that there is that mismatch in power, you can easily go into that slippery mode where that reaction can trigger some type of insecurity in you, right? And so sometimes when people react, including myself, it almost comes from sort of like protecting yourself from that pain, and that trigger that happened, where you start questioning, well, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe there's something wrong with me. I need to defend myself. And that's the immediate thought that goes in someone's mind. And going back to an incident that happened to me this morning is I've been, a lot of you know this, that, I have vestibular migraines. It is actually a disability, and I get really bad flare-ups, and there's been construction going on, and I didn't know about this in my condominium. I did not receive any notice, none of that. And so when I called my property manager and let her know about this, I think she was very like reactive and defensive. And the first thing that just I blurted out, because I was sort of like in this, oh my god, my migraine is flaring up because of how loud she was speaking, was, do you mind just lowering your voice? And her reaction was very defensive, in a way where she felt attacked, and the immediate response was, uh, I'm not being loud. That's the softest I can speak, you know, which could have been a different response, right? Like, oh, I didn't know that I was speaking loudly, or oh, I will try to speak softer, right?
Yeah.
And in that moment, what you were saying in terms of player, you don't want to be like that second player, and you want to do the 2-1 none, right? I had a choice. I could have said, why are you speaking to me this way? Right? I'm an owner. I pay for this. Um, that could have been an option. But instead, I really had to sit with it, Rachel. And I don't know how that happened automatically in my head. I think it just comes from being a business owner for 5 years now. And I had a choice. I said I could either escalate the situation. And if I'm doing it, am I doing it to get to the right outcome? Or am I doing it to cover up an insecurity and maybe a trauma response where I have been spoken down to in the past and now I have to protect myself? And so my choice was to just, simply say, well, okay, I'm not trying to be difficult here. I just want to understand this and that. I actually did not, put too much attention into that statement, and I let it go because I didn't feel it would have been constructive for me to go back to it and escalate the situation. And I think a lot of people in the corporate world, when these types of arguments happen, I don't always think that the person who's complaining about that thing is necessarily complaining about the superficial aspect. There's something underlying that they're trying to protect, and there's some kind of power dynamic that is going on. What do you think of that?
Well, kudos to you for just taking that, like, I'm gonna reapproach, right? Like, I'm gonna reapproach. And again, like, this is super important.
Yeah,
Not everyone is going to adapt for you.
exactly.
Like, that's lesson number one. I learned that lesson many moons ago, that not everyone is willing to adapt for me, for Cooper, for you.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't have that elasticity, awareness, right, in them. And that's why I wrote this book. Because folks, we need to build that gentle awareness of what others' needs are. And we need to shift what we're doing to meet them where they're at in that interaction with us. And so I think you handled it beautifully, and you practiced scaled response.
Mm-hmm.
You scaled your response. You didn't come back at her big, right? You were like, okay, her response, although insensitive, was probably not a big problem. You had a bigger issue, the construction and the noise and your migraine. Those were the big issues. Her catty response was small. Like, that's a small problem.
Yes.
And you handled it beautifully. You matched it with a small response. Small problem, small response. But you had to take the time to, like, is it worth it? What is it? How big is this? Right? And so, like, when you're sitting in a conference room with your peers, with your bosses, with your coworkers, with your customers, take the time to really scale out the size of the problem you're dealing with and the response that you're contributing to that meeting, to that conversation. Because I think we get sideways pretty quick in business of how big is it? Is it really this big? because we can pour fuel on it, or we can choose to bring calm to it.
Yeah. And I think the important piece to also take note of is that person's reaction doesn't define who you are. And I think that's the important aspect that you brought in when Cooper shared with you, like, I didn't do anything, right? And you said, actually, that's exactly that's the perfect thing that you could have absolutely have done. And I think when someone is being aggressive towards us, it's almost like we feel that we have to almost justify, and we end up making it about ourselves, and that actually makes it worse. um how do you, and I'm just going to go back to a question here,
Yeah.
how do you encounter bullying when someone has more power at work? So if you have a boss, for example, and they're constantly, let's say, nitpicking on your performance when it's not actually true, how do you handle the situation with them? I know it's a very complicated question. Like, they're coming up with evidence, maybe even, that is not true, and you're dealing with a lot of gaslighting.
I think, well, number one, I don't have that where I work today. Let's just
Thank
say that out
goodness.
loud.
Thank
I
goodness.
do not have that where I work today. I have amazing leadership,
Oh,
amazing leadership. And that's why I love what I do, is because they see me, they respect me, and they allow me to do what I do. So I'm thankful to be in the space that I'm in today. I have had not so awesome bosses, and they challenged me emotionally, right? Like they
yeah.
challenged toxicity. Can I stay in the green zone longer than I am in the red zone when I'm in their presence? And really that's about inner work,
Hmm.
knowing yourself, right? And I think um it goes back to a worksheet that Cooper did when he was in 3rd grade. And it's the one thing you need to know about me worksheet. And I would encourage everyone to do this. You don't need the worksheet to be able to do this work. But the worksheet has this. Do you know your 5 things about you? What are 5 awesome things about you? How do you see yourself? Like, how do you physically see yourself? And draw that picture. And, add the things that are, that you see you bring with you whenever you interact. And then I want you to finish the statement of, the one thing you need to know about me is. And when Cooper finished that statement, he finished it with, I'm awesome.
I love it.
And that's why I wear this shirt, Unleashing Awesome.
You know what's funny? That's the name of my company is Unleashing Your Awesome.
I know. And I just say Unleashing Awesome because when Cooper came home in 3rd grade with that little worksheet and it said, I'm awesome, it became my mission to unleash his awesome
That's so amazing.
because he knew it was in him.
This is why we get along.
Yes. And so when you come into that difficult person space,
Yeah.
you really have to ground in who you are, how
Oh,
you show up, because don't let them don't let them deviate you from your 5 things that you really like. I'm awesome at, I'm amazing at, right? And the one thing you need to know about me is. And so that's what I would encourage everyone. You need to know yourself as you're facing in and interacting with others, first and foremost.
that is absolutely true. And as someone who has close to 45,000 followers, I'll tell you guys, the more followers you have, it's like, when they say to you, like, the more you're on the road, the more you're at risk in terms of exposure and accidents. So for me, the more followers that you have, obviously, like there's got to be at least, a percentage, right? The percentage just starts increasing in terms of the types of messages and things that people say. And I am lucky. I think I would not have been prepared for that if it was 5 years ago. I feel that um, I have prepared myself with tools in order to, make some of people's reactions not about me. But that's the exact thing that I tell my clients too. And with any career, engagement that I have with clients, whether you want to get promoted, whether you want to transition to another role, whether you want to, leave your organization and get, a more fulfilling role, it truly starts with understanding yourself and feeling secure about yourself. And I
Yeah.
think feeling secure about yourself comes to understanding how awesome you are and what are the amazing qualities that you have that you bring to the table. When you do that and you have that sense of security and in your heart that you are awesome, it's not going to matter as much what the person says to you. And then the mindset shift becomes from I'm defending myself to I'm actually just adapting my communication style to how that person is. And
Yes.
it's more about them than you. And we're
Yep.
not telling people to dismiss how they feel or ignore, or minimize that person's reaction, right? But
Right.
what we can do is not fuel the fire and control what we're able to control, which is our response. And that's so beautiful that you said that. I love you did that on purpose. You wore that short on purpose.
I did. Of course I did. Very intentional. Very intentional.
My goodness. And yes, David, arguing, never a good idea in my mind. If someone wants to be right, I let them be right, even if I know they are wrong. Sometimes they realize it later. I don't engage in arguments. This is very interesting. Yes, engaging in arguments is not going to benefit anyone.
No.
So I want to go and friends, feel free to ask to put down any questions that you have for Rachel. If you're encountering a tough situation and you need her advice, we literally have 20 minutes here of free coaching. So feel free to drop your questions. As you do that, I am going to bring in a question that was sent to me from my audience. And it is when you are in an organization where people automatically look to you to solve their problems, how do you avoid falling into the trap of rescuer? What techniques can you employ to nudge people to take ownership for themselves? Ooh, this is spicy.
I love that two part. I used to be a rescuer.
Hmm.
Early in my career, when I was in a leadership position at an organization, I was a rescuer. I'm naturally a problem solver. So I think it comes a little bit hand in hand. But I had to step back and I think I thought on this question, and here's what I've come up with. A mantra we use in my house: get curious. If you are falling into the trap of solving their problems, I want you to get curious. I had a colleague that this was in my 20s, so many, many decades ago. I had a colleague that would don my door and he would always, I need help finding, I need help solving, right? I need help. He was bringing his problem to me. And this pattern went on for some time, 2-3 months. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not getting my work done because there's an interruption in the donning of my door with I need help. And I'm more than happy to help anyone do anything. But at some point, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not making this person independent. I'm not helping them build their skill. And so I put a rule in place with this individual. I said, I want you to come up with, if you have a problem sitting in front of you or a task and you need to find resources or you need to, put a plan together for that task, I want you to come up with 3 ways you think you could solve this with. And if you want to review those 3 ways, I'm happy to do so. And if you get stuck, like I've thought of this, this, and this, but I couldn't find X, Y, and Z, then I'll engage. But I need you to be proactive in helping yourself. And so I took the seat also of starting to ask more questions. Have you thought about? Did you try? Right? Versus I have the answer. I could just tell you, but I'm not going to, not out of, spite or trickery, but out of growth. We want, as leaders, we want to help people grow. And so I started asking more questions and positioning as questions. So that's the first part, because I think there's 2 parts to this question. That's that falling into the trap of the rescuer. Get curious. See what patterns you're enabling with that coworker in the organization. Start asking questions and create a structure that enables their growth. The second part was, what techniques can you employ to nudge people to take ownership for themselves? I had a lot around this one. I wrote a lot. And I think the simple thing comes down to, do you understand the function of their behavior? Is it avoidance? Are they not wanting to do the task, so they're avoiding taking ownership?
Yeah.
Is it something tangible that they're seeking? They need support, so they're not taking ownership? Are they seeking attention? I want to spend time with you, so I make it look like I'm not taking ownership because I want to be in your presence. And then I ask about the AMP model, that advocate, motivate, participate. Are we dealing with the default setting that's playing a part in this? Do they have a default setting of when they're asked to own something, they get small, they delay, right? Like, what is the default setting you're seeing in relation to their ownership of what you're asking them to own? What support knowledge do you need to provide to them so that they can own it? And then look at what capabilities, what skills they need. Do they know what the definition of ownership is? Is it shared? Yeah. Have you articulated it out loud out here and said, when I give you something to own, my expectation is it looks like this, very specific. And let them articulate back what they heard so that it is shared. And also give them the grace and the room to do it in their own style. I have come across, I have a very specific style, very specific personality, right? It's an interesting personality that I have. But I have colleagues that do the same jobs that I've done in my past that have a different style.
Yeah.
But I can remember a boss, this is probably 15 years ago. He didn't want to promote someone to the position that would be the same position that I was in because they didn't show up like me. And I advocated so hard for that individual because I said, listen, we don't need everyone to be a Rachel in the world. That'd be too much. That'd be too much. We need to respect his style. And so when you're thinking about ownership,
yes,
like, we're all different. We all show up different. And so if you are intense and you're type A or a triple A, like you're go, 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 and this is how you own things, that's your style. But don't expect to inflict that style onto someone else that isn't that. So that's why I go back to definition and expectation. That's super important.
Exactly. And what you just said reminded me of that little story that I shared about that property manager. When she made that remark and when she was speaking loudly that way, a thought crossed my mind. And I just said, I don't think she's necessarily doing this on purpose. That just could be her style of communication. And I think it's a dance that we need to dance in order to openly communicate at the right time when emotions are not high, in terms of saying, hey, listen, I understand this is how you communicate, and also what I need from you, and the style that I need from you. Can we adjust it to this style because it would help me achieve X, Y, and Z and give you what you need, right?
And I'm
Um,
suffering with a migraine.
yes, and I'm struggling with a migraine.
And that there goes the empathy, right? You opened up to why you it to dial back the volume because you had a physical need.
Yes,
Yeah, being
yes,
vulnerable enough to share that.
absolutely. The thing about what that question that we just answered around, basically not going into that basically enabler mode, um, it really ties to me into not creating codependency.
Mhm.
And this is something that I personally struggled with as a coach, mainly because I grew up in a very codependent, environment within my family, where I saw that my mom, was acting in a certain way where she would always go into this martyr victim, mindset, and always like, give, 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 and put so much value into giving when it's not something that she wanted to necessarily do, right? And at the beginning of my coaching practice, this started seeping in, where people were messaging me at all hours, and I felt that I had to give so much and I'd feel guilty if I wasn't available. And then I realized that this is actually not helping people at the end of the day. It wasn't even about my discomfort. It was actually not helping people, because when people would complete my program, I didn't feel that they were empowered to be self-sufficient, to the extent of, I was writing people's resumes from scratch. I was just, always being the one that they come to. And that shifted how I basically created my business model after that, when I ended up with that self-awareness and started getting that feedback and realized that I was actually not helping people. And I ended up, turning my program into a community-based program, where it kind of gets people to not just rely on me, but to actually openly share what they're going through, because that's another exercise that I think people need to basically, or that's a skill set that people need to have, is in the workplace. You're not actually supposed to rely on one person.
Right.
You're supposed to really be good at networking, and being a team player, and talking to different people, and actually feeling vulnerable and comfortable to actually share your thoughts in a meeting, versus taking your boss aside and letting them know after the fact, right? And something incredible happened recently in my community, where someone sent me an email, shared with me that she was going through imposter syndrome, shared with me how she's not comfortable sharing, that she feels like she's not as experienced as she needs to be. And so I gave her this exercise. I said, do you want to solve this? Like, are you willing to do whatever it takes to solve this, even if it's uncomfortable? And she said yes. So I said, the first thing that I want you to do is to share this openly with everyone. And when she did, it was just, I was just in awe with everyone's level of empathy, of sharing their own stories of how they navigated this in the workplace. And in the end, what it ended up doing was actually giving her the data and the evidence that it's actually okay to ask for help. It's actually okay to not just rely on one person. And so I really, really, really love your answer to this. And I do believe that it's important that we, help people become self-sufficient. You're actually doing more harm than good as a coach or a leader when you don't do that.
Yeah.
There's a question from Nathan. How do you know when it's time to leave the place that's toxic and not suitable for you anymore, or stay put and continue working through the situation?
Oh, Nathan, that's an interesting question. In the consulting world, they have this famous phrase, and I hate this phrase. Are you running away from something or are you running to something? And I hate that phrase because you can do both. You can be running away from something and naturally that's going to something. And it's okay to recognize this isn't healthy for me. This doesn't line up with my values. I'm not able to, express myself in a manner where my colleagues respect my style or, so that's a tough one. I don't know if there is an indicator. You know what I mean? Like, you'll see these signs on your path and then that means exit. I will say from my past, I can clearly go back when I decided to leave an organization, and there were four signs. I skipped sign 1, I stayed there. Skip sign 2, stay there. 3, stayed there. 4, I got out. And it was about just knowing. You have to know, and you have to protect your mental health. You can't sit in toxicity and be okay. So I don't have a clear answer on the path says these, you will see these things and that means exit.
There isn't a formula.
No. But I would say maybe do that inner work, right? Yeah. What do you need from an organization? What do you need from colleagues, peers, leaders, right? Like, just as I looked at Cooper and looked at his needs from a capability lens, and every year we set goals on his birthday of what capability skill we're going to work on, and we set a goal to it. Maybe look at it from that lens of, why are you unhappy? What makes it challenging or toxic, right? And then look at, is there anything that you can do that will help make the shift to where you can find joy in it? And if you can't, it's okay to leave. Like, that's okay too.
Absolutely. When people ask me this question, they're usually clients. And what we do is we go in, I have what I call a career archetype assessment. And part of that career archetype assessment is what you mentioned, is understanding yourself. What can you tolerate? What can't you tolerate? What brings you joy? Right? A lot of it, I believe, is treating, roles that you have in an organization like a relationship. So in terms of the first, sign, I would say, Jason, is understanding what your values are. And the first thing for me, if there is that value incompatibility, then I know that this is not the right place for me to be, just like in a relationship. And as much as we're telling people that in this live that you need to have tools in order to respond, effectively, there's a difference between responding effectively and feeling like you have to continue to stay and respond effectively. Right? You can respond effectively and you can choose to leave, just like in a relationship that is incompatible with a partner, right? If I have a partner, we're two good people, even if we're not compatible, I am going to choose to respond in a kind way that is respectful. But it doesn't mean that I have to continue to be in the relationship as it is, because, what that's going to do, it's going to create resentment, and it's not in alignment with the goal that I have set for myself in my career or in that specific relationship, right? So let us say, for example, one of your needs is to, I don't know, do more product work, and your organization is not giving you that type of work, and you know that that's what would make you happy. You can respond in an effective way till you find the next opportunity, right? It doesn't mean that you give up on finding an organization that's going to honor that need. The second thing, and I call it the types of problems that you like solving, right? That's the type of work. The second thing is your collaboration style. If you feel that the collaboration style. You have someone who's constantly berating you, constantly putting you down, constantly communicating with you in a way that makes you feel uncomfortable. Yes, you can respond effectively in that moment to, de-escalate, the communication. But again, it doesn't mean that you have to stay. You can find an organization where you get along with someone else and there's less friction. And then the third question that I ask people is, what's the type of legacy that you want to leave behind? What is the type of social impact that you want to make, right? If the organization is limited in that area and they're just not capable of that because of the structure, the dynamic, the nature of the industry, again, it doesn't mean that you have to give up on that. You can still look for that. But like you said, Rachel, it comes from understanding what is it that you want and who you are. And that is going to empower you to make the right decision. And leaving is not failure. It simply is finding better compatibility. That's all it is.
I love that. I love that. That's awesome.
All right. So we are almost at time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. First of all, if you guys haven't done that yet, please, because we could sit here for hours and still not answer your questions. And instead of doing that, just pick up the book and read it.
Yeah.
You can read it over and over and over again. You can, all the frameworks are laid out. And, I was just looking, like, you have such a comprehensive, like, appendix, and you have, like, the framework. It reminds me of this, like, this totally has a tell that you have an MBA and come from consulting with how structured everything and formulaic everything is. So guys, just pick up the book. It's all in here. That way, you're not going to forget and you can reference it. It's written in such a beautiful way, in a storytelling way. I honestly couldn't even put down the book. I'm like halfway through and it's only been a week that I've been reading it. And I've also cheated and also looked at the tools. So get it. You're not going to regret it. I love this book. I do. I love it so much. So get the book.
That's awesome.
I'm like a, fan here. So just get the book and please connect with Rachel. I think I've tagged her on the post, but I'm going to put her, profile again. And, thank you so much for being here. And Rachel, holy crap. We connected after 7 years again.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Picked up like old times. It's so awesome. Thank you. I cannot thank you enough for this opportunity, and just what a fantastic conversation with your community. And thank you for elevating just that need to build skill and response, the ability to respond. I love it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And unleashing awesome. That's what we will go do in the world, right? We will go do that in the world.
This is how we're like kindred spirits.
We are. We are. Yeah.
All right. I'm ending the live.